A man referred to as 9/11's 20th hijacker who planned on taking part in the attack has been released from Guantanamo Bay prison and sent back to Saudi Arabia for psychiatric treatment. According to the 9/11 Commission report, Mohammed al-Qahtani was supposed to be on board United Airlines 93, which crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, but was stopped from entering the country at the airport just over a month before the attack. Now, after spending 2 decades at the U.S. detention camp, the Department of Defense has sent him back to his home country. The release of al-Qahtani has many family members of 9/11 victims and some Republicans on Capitol Hill outraged, while many military legal experts say the move is the right thing to do. I'm torn on this one, and I'll tell you why in a moment. In August 2001, al-Qahtani was turned away at the Orlando airport by an immigration officer suspicious of his travel. The lead September 11th hijacker, Mohammed Atta, was actually at the airport waiting to pick him up. Many believe that al-Qahtani, being denied entry into the U.S., allowed the passengers on Flight 93 to overpower the hijackers, as this flight had 4 hijackers instead of the other flights that had 5. The Border Protection Officer, Jose Melendez Perez, who refused to allow his entry into the U.S., was celebrated as a hero. U.S. forces later captured al-Qahtani in December 2001 in Afghanistan. He was fighting with the Taliban during the Battle of Tora Bora. The now 46-year-old has been in Guantanamo for 20 years, but deemed too dangerous to leave. The Pentagon has confirmed al-Qahtani was subjected to torture during interrogations. Charges were dropped against him in 2009 since the evidence had been obtained through torture, and you can't admit that in court. So he had no trial. The Department of Defense taking action after a U.S. review board, including military and intelligence officials, determined in 2021 that his detention was no longer necessary to protect against a continuing significant threat to the national security of the United States. They found that al-Qahtani suffered from schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, couldn't receive adequate care at the U.S. military prison. Now, look, I can understand why family members of 9/11 victims, as well as lawmakers, have spoken out against it. Angela Mistrulli, whose father, Joseph, died in the World Trade Center on 9/11, said, quote, "I think it's very sad to be a child of someone who was killed on 9/11, not to have a day in court for my father and the 3,000 other people who were murdered. Find it more and more they're taking away our ability to prosecute and get the truth." Florida Senator Marco Rubio, also serves as vice chairman of the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, released a statement which said in part, "I believe he remains committed to jihad and the destruction of the United States. The decision to transfer al-Qahtani is not simply a lapse in judgment. It's a massive error which poses a serious risk to our national security and the security of all our allies." So on the one hand, he served 20 years, despite not even having a trial. He was tortured and has been deemed by those who interviewed him not to pose a threat anymore. And yet it wasn't just his failed effort on 9/11. He was also fighting with the Taliban against the United States when he was captured. But there aren't really hard, fast rules for possible sentences when you're talking about someone who's been held without a trial. Joining me now is Jason Wright, national security lawyer and former JAG, who was appointed by the Department of Defense to represent 2 detainees at Guantanamo Bay, including alleged mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. That was back in 2014. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so what do you make of the decision?
It's a difficult one, as you noted, Dan. My heart goes out to, I know every other military officer's heart goes out to the family members of 9/11. But at the same time, this decision, as best as I can tell from the interagency review process, was predicated on the laws of war. And the U.S., like other countries in the world, are obligated under the Geneva Conventions from an international legal framework to follow the laws of war. And here, as you indicated, there was a decision that continued detention was no longer necessary, consistent with the laws of war.
And is that the definition with regard to the laws of war as to when you release someone?
In this particular case, there are 2 different conventions that would apply. Geneva Convention 3rd relating to prisoners of war, and the 4th one relating to civilians. But casting that aside, the U.S. has implemented international law through domestic policy, through this interagency review board process, which was started back in the Biden administration, where it's an interagency review process made up not just of Department of Defense, but Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and even the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Their principals meet, and they decide who should go and who should stay. So it really is this U.S. domestic policy that has transcended administrations from Biden to Trump, from Obama to Trump to Biden, that now has prevailed in terms of this release decision.
But there is no sort of hard, fast rules, right, when it comes to Guantanamo. It's just sort of this new thing where all these people are being held there without a trial. And the question becomes, what should the sentence be?
Well, when deciding what the sentence should be, there has to be some type of criminal prosecution as part of that.
It's not really a sentence.
Exactly.
It's really a detention.
Detention for reasons of imperative security is the language used in the Fourth Geneva Convention. So when nations go to war, they're allowed to kill, unfortunately, if it's lawful under the laws of armed conflict. They're also allowed to detain, and that's a use of force. The use of force is, a detention authority is still a use of force, but that can only be for the duration of the hostilities or where it's imperative for reasons of security.
You know how things would change. Things would change if this guy gets caught doing something else bad. If he gets caught up to no good, they're going to change the whole process, I'll bet.
Which is interesting because the Periodic Review Board, this interagency process, also said that he is being repatriated to his home country, and on the condition that certain types of mitigating measures are put into effect. He according to the order that I saw, he will be in a custodial psychiatric hospital. He will not be permitted to leave the country. He will be monitored. So I understand, and this is a classified process, but there are probably a lot of conversations between the United States government and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
But I was going to say, so we got to trust the Saudis on that, which is, not always so easy. Jason Wright, complicated issue. Thanks a lot for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.